If you've been in the D&D building community for any length of time, you probably know that Hexblades have arguably the most efficient first level dip in the entire game. It's so efficient that every single charisma-based class either optimally needs to take one level in Hexblade, or at least has optimal builds that take one level in Hexblade. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the problems with Hexblade, what I actually really like about it, and something that I think fixes the Hexblade completely. Roll the intro. Let's begin with the problem. As the intro suggested, the main problem is how much value you get for a one level investment. So let's explore what you get. You get proficiency with medium armor, shields, and martial weapons. You get to choose one non-two-handed weapon and make it a charisma based weapon, meaning that your attack and damage rolls use your charisma modifier instead of your dexterity or strength. Additionally, once per rest, you get to choose one enemy that you're going to deal more damage to, that you're going to have expanded criticals towards, and when they die, you get healed. And on top of that, you get Shield, arguably the best first level spell in the game, as well as Wrathful Smite, which is one of Paladin's best spells in the game. What this means is that if you're a charisma based martial, you want to have a level in Hexblade. This is every single Paladin in the entire game. Additionally, if you are a charisma caster that is squishy, you want a one level Hexblade to round out your defenses massively with the medium armor and shields. On top of that, if you are a crit fisher, you want a one level Hexblade in order to expand your critical hits. This is such a wide range of builds that the one level dip into Hexblade is prolific. Now take it from somebody who's made hundreds of builds on this channel. The most common comment I get is it would be better with one level dip into Hexblade. That tells you something. Potentially the biggest problem I have with Hexblade though is that their patron sucks. Most patrons have a ton of flavor, a ton of interesting things going on with them, and I really don't feel that way about Hexblade. It's a lame patron. A perfect example of this is Ford from Critical Role. He is a Hexblade, but he has a fathomless patron. That just tells you how lame the Hexblade patron is. So all this comes together to create a problem, and that problem is that too many builds want one level into Hexblade. It becomes unoriginal, uninspired, unfun. But it's not all bad. There are some things that Hexblade does that makes the game better. Now I want to discuss those. What I like about Hexblades can be boiled down to this sentence. They give warlocks the tools to be actually efficient martials. Now you might be saying, hey, any subclass can be a martial, just take Pact to the Blade. Well, sure, that gives you one tool, but you are a light armored who's not focused completely on dexterity build, you're gonna be so squishy. And if you want to actually be doing good damage, it means you can't invest in your charisma. So you have to invest in strength instead of your charisma, which essentially makes you a terrible spellcaster and you're just a bad martial. Hexblade gives us the tools to be able to actually stay in the front line and be reasonably protected, and it allows us to mix martial with our spellcasting capabilities, not choose between the two. As it stands, if you're choosing between the two, you end up just a bad version of both, where Hexblade can be a solid version of both. So now we have what we like about Hexblade and we have what we don't like about Hexblade. What changes can we make to the game to really marry those two in an efficient way? So here is the solution I propose. Remove Hexblade from the game. Don't worry, we're keeping everything cool about Hexblade. All we're doing is removing it from a subclass and we're moving it into the base class. Specifically, we're going to be giving it to Pact of the Blade and our invocations. So I would create two new invocations and update one of them. The first one is that I would update the improved Pact weapon to let us use charisma-based attacks for both our attack rolls and our damage rolls when using our Pact weapon. Not only do we get +1 to our weapon, now we can use charisma with it. That's the invocation I would update. Now the two invocations I would change, the first is going to be a Pact of the Blade exclusive, and that's going to allow us to use medium armor and shields. We're going to get proficiency in those too. Simple. And finally, I'm just going to take Hexblade's Curse and make it an invocation that any warlock can take at any level, no prerequisite. What does this do for us? Well, first and foremost, it means that we no longer have that one level dip to get those charisma-based attacks. So similar to Battlesmith, we're going to have a ton of builds that want to go into Battlesmith to get those intelligence-based attacks, in this case charisma-based attacks, but not every single build, because it's a real investment. 3 levels is a reasonable investment for such a powerful ability. And what I really like about this is it still allows us to do multi-classes into charisma-based attacks, but it's just not going to be as prolific. Some builds are going to see that 3-level dip as too expensive. More importantly, though, is that this is going to expand the amount of warlock builds we can do exponentially. We can now take Pact of the Fae, for example, who notoriously has to stay in the backline because they're a squishy Eldritch Blaster, but their feature is used within 5 feet, so there's this disconnect with Pact of the Fae. This really helps them out. Now they have the option to take medium armor, shields, get up close and fight people, and then they have the option, instead of doing their attacks, they can now try and hypnotize them. So you get this cool mix between a hypnotizer and a martial, a controller and a martial. That's really unique and really cool, and the tip of the icebergs of all of the builds that this is going to enable. We can now have melee Pact of the Fiends, we can have hybrids, we can do so many things, and I really like how much flavor this opens up for us. Not only do we have a bunch of mechanical builds, now we can actually mix interesting patrons with melee combat. So instead of just being this weird Hexblade patron, now we have a Fathomless patron that is a crab maybe, and so we take a crab-like fighting style in melee. We can mix actually interesting flavor. Maybe we have a demon as our patron. Demons love to fight in melee. Another great example of mixing it in together. And speaking of patrons, you can become a patron of this channel by joining our Patreon. Not only are we gonna get the superpower of your support, you're gonna get the superpower of some awesome benefits. It's a win-win situation. Now moving back into the solution, by moving the Hexblade's Curse into Invocations, now with a 2-level dip into Warlock, you can still get the benefits of a Crit Fisher. I think that's a really reasonable level for such a obscure build type. You can do 3 levels into Champion Fighter to have it all the time, or you can do 2 levels into Warlock to get the Invocations for Hexblade's Curse to have a limited version. I think that's more than fair. So in conclusion, we're going to be balancing out the game mechanically, we're going to be increasing flavor, and we're going to be expanding the options for interesting builds you can do all at once with a few simple changes. Of course, that's just my opinion. What would you guys do to fix the Hexblade? Let me know in the comments down below. I also want to give a shout out to one of our newest Patreons who has a fantastic name. Thank you so much, Mr. Spook Whoop. We really appreciate the support, and I look forward to getting to know you better. But with that, my friends, I hope you have yourselves an incredible day, and I'll catch you on the next one. See you then.